What do you have for breakfast?
I didn't have anything actually.
You didn't have any food
I had a
this
cup
morning?
of tea, that's it. I had a cup of tea and I've had some pasta and that's it. I don't eat much. It's like after the Great North Run, I was going to have some, my mum was like, oh, come down and have steak and chips. And I was like, I cannot be arsed. Like, getting home, having a shower and then having to go back down to my mum's. I couldn't be arsed.
So you weren't hungry after?
Well, I wasn't hungry, but my mum did bring some food up for us. But like, who wants to do a race, get a shower, get in the bed and like be comfy and then have to go down the hill? And it's not just like, oh, I can walk down, it's like getting in the car, from the car, getting out of the car, it's just, and then I'll have to do it the opposite way, getting back. So I was like, no, I'll quite happily just sit and do now at home. You can bring me dinner up. I was sitting, no, I didn't sit in bed and eat it, but like, couldn't be bothered with. It's just the extra effort. Like, it's one of those things I just like, but then even when I used to walk and going down with mum's and that, I was just like, just an effort. Like, I just want to be in my own company. Like, and again, I've never had my name shouted so much. Well done, Abbie, you're inspirational, it's this, it's that, it's so that. I was sick of hearing my name. And then there was people running past, like big people running past, oh, well done, you're an inspiration, you're doing great. Hadn't even started then. And honestly, yeah, I was like, you're an inspiration too. Just because I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean I'm any much different to you. But it's mad how it makes such a massive difference being in a wheelchair. And like, people think you're amazing. It's like, just like you, but in a chair. So, and it's like, it's not condescending, but sometimes it is. It's like when we're going to the start line, it was like queues from Lees's Park all the way up to like the start line, like it was back and forth. And well, Sam's mum, Diane, was like, oh, wheelchairs coming through, wheelchair. So people flipping made way. Like, there was only a few people that like were a bit arsy because I just sat there. It was pouring down rain. Diane was just like pushing us through everybody and hit a few feet. I was like, I'm not in control. I don't have any control of this chair. But it was good. But it was horrendous, the weather. It was shocking. But yeah, I've done it in the worst conditions. What's the better? Yeah, I don't know. It's just literally you were flying down hills, and there's more down hills than you think. There's not, from the start line all the way up until, you know, where that fire was. Do you know which one I mean? To there, it was all downhill, and then there was a little bit of uphill there, up to the bridge, and then it was flat across the bridge, and then at the other side there was it was a steady hill going up, and then there was like, I think, one other hill, but there weren't hills that I'm used to, so it was quite okay. Like, I wasn't like going really slow like a snail's pace. Sam got pushed up all them, I'm gonna say. So he was like, got pushed up by his mum, but his mum's like that, and he's like 15 stone or whatever. His mum couldn't push him, so this guy helped him, but like, he got away quite quickly, so it was in front of me, and I was thinking, he's gonna get, but no, I got with him. And then by halfway around, we just ended up sticking together because there was too many people. Like, people weren't listening. People had headphones in. You know, constantly chopping in front of people, hitting their feet. It was just, loved it. But if I want to actually do a PB, or like, you have to do it with less people, because it wasn't horrendous, but it was more stressful avoiding people than it was doing the run. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't like, you were constantly having to shout, and because we didn't have, if it was an okay day, it would have been fine, but because it was downhill, so a lot of them were parts were going downhill, you had no traction, you physically couldn't slow down at all.
So you think next time, because you've done something more like an event, you want to do it for a little bit more for a time next time?
But now I've got the bug of doing loads of like races and that, and because I want to get a PB, because it's great saying, oh, I'll go to Wylam and I'll do 12 miles, but it's not like, in your head, it's not like a race, like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's not a race. So yeah, I'm doing it I've said I'm doing it next year, but I'm gonna put my time down as like an hour and a half, just so I can get to the front of the queue. But But to be honest, I would have been able to get the front of the queue if I turned up, if we were on time. We got there at 11 o'clock. The Red Arrows had flew over at 10 or whatever time the race started. But we had these bands that were, don't listen to this, but we photocopied them. Drew had like bands that got you in everywhere. And now it's like, just photocopy them. Photocopy them, they looked illiterate. So I put some sticky back paper on, stuck them on. I was like, so we'll just go around, like, and they were letting them opening the gates for, we're letting them through. But obviously at the start line, there was that many people queuing up that you couldn't exactly just. But next time, I'll be putting a silly time so I can get to the front of the queue. Yeah.
Where were you born? Where are you from?
So I was born and raised in Newcastle. I was, oh God, wait there. I don't even know which hospital I was born in, but wait there. No, so I was born and raised in Newcastle. I lived in Newcastle until I was 15-year-old. Brought up in Wallsend, then moved to Freeman Road, where the Freeman Hospital is, and then we moved next to where my grandparents lived, and I went to two high schools in Newcastle, and then when we moved from Newcastle, we moved up to Twicebrewed, which is past Hexham Way, and I lived there from when I was 15 to 22.
So you kind of had a normal sort of
So when
school upbringing?
When I lived in Newcastle, I wouldn't say we were city people, but you know, you'd done your normal thing, you went to the shops. We didn't really go out into the countryside much. If we went to the countryside, it was a big thing, or you were going miles away and going for a walk, but actually, when you look back, it wasn't really that far away. And now I seemed a long way, and we were, up until I was 13, 14, it was very city orientated. We didn't really visit the countryside much, but when I was 14, 15, my mum and dad looked at a bed and breakfast. Don't know why. We loved moving houses. I think we lived in 4 houses in Newcastle, and then for some reason Mum and Dad thought it would be a great idea to buy a bed and breakfast. I don't know why, but we went up there and had a look at it and fell in love with it, and then ended up, before we even moved there, we ended up camping up there once, and we were camping next to one of my good friends' house, which was, when we look back, it was weird, and we thought it was like amazing camping in the middle of nowhere and all this, but actually it isn't the middle of nowhere. And then I think it was a year later we lived there, which was mad. But one of the reasons when we moved up there, well, not that I had a choice in moving up there, but I got told, well, if we move to the countryside, you can buy a horse. So my dream come true, I got a horse. Because I used to ride at Stepney Bank Stables in Newcastle, but it was a very expensive riding there. I think it was, at the time, it was £25 a lesson for a 45-minute lesson. That's expensive even now. But we moved up there, and I think I was 15 when we moved up there, so I was in my last year of school, and I moved schools, and we moved in the August, and by the end of August I had a job at the Twicebrewed pub, which was the pub literally along the road, and it was like a little family working at the pub. There was all the families who kind of lived in the area. A lot of the siblings worked there. It was Brian and Pauline who owned the pub. They were amazing. Used to be, you got free drinks, free burgers with burger and chips was £6 back in the day, when actually food and drink was a decent price. Or a lot of the time, because I worked there for so long, you didn't pay for drinks. You just went, had a good time, and the bar bill would disappear at the end of the night.
So before that, when you were at school as a kid, were you sporty? Did you do much activities?
No, well, I played for Novos, I think, from 13 to 15, but but it wasn't really I wasn't a sporty kid. I got into sport, like I would say it's not, horse riding's not really a sport though. Well, it is, but that was a sport that I kind of done when I was 13, I think, but I wasn't a sporty kid at all. I played netball, but that was short-lived. And then I started riding at Stepney Bank Stables, and that was, I just fell in love with riding. And then when you start riding, if you like riding, oh, I want a horse, I want this, I want that. You buy all the gear, but have no idea. But one of the ways that Mum got, well, she didn't get where to move to the countryside, but one of the perks was, oh, you can get your own horse. Me being blasé and thinking, oh yeah, what a great idea. But actually you don't realise how much hard work goes into having a horse, looking after it, keeping its vet bills, getting its feet trimmed by the farrier, which is £100. God knows how much it is now. That was 7-8 years ago now, but I wouldn't want to know how much it is to look after the horse. Also, put it in somewhere to keep it. You can't exactly keep it in your back garden. We didn't have the room then to have them, but then we ended up getting stables built. But we don't, yeah, horses are an expensive hobby. But that was the only sport that I actually really enjoyed.
So moving from sort of a city school out into the sticks, what was it like, kind of just moving away from your friends? What was it like?
So,
was a massive shift in your life?
Yeah, so I did want to stay at my high school, but at the time Mum was like, no, it's far too far to travel, because being an hour away from the city is far. In reality now we look back and think it's not that far. And we learned since they moved back to Newcastle from Northumberland, Emily was in high school and she travelled from Newcastle to the school that I went to the opposite way. So really in hindsight, yes, I could have stayed at my school, but at that time it was idyllic, countryside living, you know, very blasé to the fact of Newcastle's not literally round the corner, but it isn't as far as everyone makes it out to be.
You must have some mad stories from,
I've got so many mad stories.
From a B&B up in Northumberland.
So many mad stories. So this guy, yes, this guy's son was sleeping in the chicken coop. At the time, we didn't know the ins and outs of the story. Basically, the guy and his son, so the guy was an alcoholic and his son had had enough of him and basically said he was leaving, but obviously slept in the chicken coop. We appear buying this guest house, and Emily goes and checks on the chickens, and you know, pride and joy what she's chosen out of like a bunch of chicken, and there's a guy sleeping in the chicken coop, and we were thinking, what the fuck? So that happened, and then we got a phone call from the moving guys that were bringing our stuff from Newcastle to the bed and breakfast at Falham, and they'd broken down halfway here. So at this point, the handover had happened and Eric had left, and Mum and Dad are thinking, what the f have we just done? Everything happens for a reason though, doesn't it? That's what I say. Yeah.
Do you think that?
No, I think everything happens for a reason. And obviously, even like my childhood and everything's happened for a reason, from even moving to the countryside to getting a horse, to getting animals, to whatever, to then moving back to Newcastle, to then get a nail and whatever. It happened for a reason. Don't know what that reason is, but it happened. Because I was thinking, what if I got ill when we lived, not just at Falham, but when we moved out to Greenley, which was a 1.5 miles along a track, in the middle of nowhere, opening 5 gates in from, what would have happened then? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things that everything does happen for a reason.
You're driving at this point?
Yeah, so I think
bit of freedom.
17, I got my licence. didn't pass I think I'd had 2 lots of the theory and then I passed that, and 2 lots of the driving test as well, and then I passed that. But at that I think I might have been, I was either 18 or like nearly 18 when I passed my driving test. And for that was a long time because a lot of my friends were a year older than us. They were all driving, and it was one of those things that you just wanted to get on the road. Eventually I passed my test, first time going into Newcastle, and I was like, right, I'm going to go into Newcastle, because I thought in my head that Newcastle would be the easiest place to go shopping, whereas actually when you think about it, the Metro Centre would have been. But in any case, me and my sister got in the car, drove to Newcastle, was on the way home. For some reason, I don't know why, but I thought, oh no, I do know why, because Dad said, oh, go the back roads back home. So I'm thinking, okay, so did we have a sat-nav? I can't even remember if sat-navs must have been a thing, but whatever. Trying to go back, I end up going through Ponteland and Darras Hall and somehow managing to crash the car and wrote it off. So that was the first time out. I don't think it was the first time out, but it was the first time going into Newcastle and I wrote my car off. So I'm ringing Mum going, I've been in a crash. Yeah, so that was one of my first times driving on my own to Newcastle, yeah.
So the sense of freedom, I want to try and maybe fast forward a little bit to when was the first time, because you're active, you're young, you're just living a normal life. So I really want to kind of look into that, just like you mentioned that, and then go into when did the seizures start, what happened,
right, okay, yeah.
where were you and what was it?
Yeah.
Because clearly you've been fine up until now, you're riding horses and driving cars and all sorts of stuff.
So that was, passport, but I come back from living in Australia and I didn't have a job, so I had to sign on the dole, and that was the most, not embarrassing thing, but I was mortified the fact that I had to get money from the state, like, oh, signing on, I'm on the dole. Like, that was mortifying to me, because when I grew up, you worked. There was not many people, even though everyone says, oh, there's no jobs. Where we lived, everybody had a job, and it wasn't like, no, there's no jobs. You can get a job wherever you look. So for me, it was mortifying that actually I had to sign on, and I was like, I think I signed on, I think I got 2 months worth of payments, and I got myself a job at North Lakes, which was a school / care, and there was care homes within the company as well. And that was for children, young boys with behavioural problems and who were in the care system. That was an amazing job, which I always think back now and I go, I wonder how such and such is doing. And that job was eye-opening. You don't realise how lucky you are until you hear about the people who aren't as lucky as yourselves, from families to neglect to some things that come out of young boys' mouths that you would never think someone that young should be able to comprehend what it means. But I really enjoyed it, and it was seeing the benefits of and the happy things that these boys who've come from nothing and been not well looked after, to being able to laugh with them and, you know, do something for the first time with them, going on a giant swing. Like, and it was amazing. And I worked throughout the school year, and then the 6 weeks holiday I went over to Greece to work in Greece. But just before I went over to Greece, I'd done some work in the care homes. I'd done I think it was a 12-hour shift, and it was just coming to the end. So I was in from 10 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night. And I had been out with one of the boys, and it was 2 to 1. So we went, I think, to Walbury Farm Park and done a few other things. And he had went to bed at the night time when we were upstairs in the office. And this was the first ever time that I had felt a seizure coming on since I was 14. Yes, and when I first had the seizures, and I pat myself. I thought, what the hell? And at this time, the pub, when I worked at the pub, I never said I had epilepsy. When I worked at the school, I never said I had epilepsy. When I worked at house, I never mentioned it, because I always thought it was a negative against your name, and they might not employ you because, oh, you've got this and that might be a risk, so I never mentioned it.
But you weren't having any problems with it?
No, because for years I was fine, and I was 21 at this point. I think I was working a lot, and there was a lot of, it was a stressful job, even though it wasn't. There was a lot to take with, it wasn't just a school job, it wasn't just looking after these kids that didn't have families. There was a lot more behind the scenes, and you got involved a lot in that child's life, which is a good thing, but also when I look back, it was constant and you didn't really switch off. For there's then to be doing shifts in the care homes, so I could be doing a 5-day week and then doing a day on a Saturday, doing a 12-hour shift in a care home, which I loved it at the time, but finishing this night shift, and I was with one of the girls, and I was upstairs, and I thought, so I totally panicked. I was just like, I've got epilepsy, like I feel like I'm having a seizure. So the manager of the home came and then sent us to hospital, and Carlisle Hospital, I just got passed off, and it was just like, oh well, there's nothing we can do, just crack on, go home.
Was this the start of the seizures from
Yeah,
then
so
on?
this was the start of the seizures, but because when it happened, the hospital didn't care, and they were just like, oh, whatever. I don't think we took it seriously, so from months after that I was driving to and from work, whatever, but then they became more frequent, and I was having them at work. It would be maybe once a month I would have them at work, and it was always after the kids had gone home, so 4 o'clock maybe, and I was in the office, and it happened 2 or 3 times, but in the end the school said, no, we're going to have to let your mum know because it cannot keep on going on. I've always been on medication, but for years when I travelled, whatever, I never used to take it. I used to be like, oh, I'll be fine. I'll take it in the night time, or I forget, or whatever. It was my safety blanket. I knew it was there. I knew like my rescue beds were there, but I'll be like, oh, it doesn't matter. Like, you're young and naive. You just think, well, I'm living my best life, whatever. I'm travelling, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And maybe it's had an impact on where I am today. I don't know, you can't turn the clock back. So me eventually them saying actually at work, you can't be driving, because also I was driving the kids around. Okay, fair enough. So mum and dad were I told them, and they were like, right, okay. So in living where we lived, we lived in Greenley, which was 1.5 miles along a track, 5 gates to get there. So I was legally allowed to drive on private property. So for me to get a taxi, which cost an absolute fortune, and for 3-4 weeks I was relying on my parents to drop us off at a car park, for then friends from work to pick us up to drive us to work, and then vice versa. Bear in mind, parents had the bed and breakfast, and they were doing all of this as well as looking after the horse. But yeah, that happened, I think, for a good 2-3 weeks, and then I thought, I can't keep on doing this. I was getting taxis, but I thought, I can't keep on doing this. I'm going to look for somewhere in Newcastle. I then moved into mine, and my parents done it with a horse box, you know. Not many people say, yeah, their first house and they didn't even move in. I didn't move into my own house. My parents got all my stuff from Greenley, put it all in the horse box. I think they took 2 trips and took it down, put everything in for us. And then I just got back of a night time from work, and everything was there. It was fab.
So now you're in the city, back in the city
So
from
now,
the countryside, and it's more of a independent lifestyle, because now you can't work because of the seizures, so you've got to be close to work, and
yeah, so I used
like using public transport and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's the top and bottom of why I moved to Newcastle. But then COVID hit. So yes, getting my freedom back, and yes, being able to do all these things, but then this horrible COVID just decided to throw that in the mix, and then it was, okay, I could still go to work because we looked after vulnerable adults, but my social life was non-existent again because of COVID. But being in the countryside, maybe I would have had more of a social life, because COVID in the city to COVID in the countryside, there's no different between a normal day in the countryside to a COVID day, because you've got to be prepared. You've got to, when you live somewhere like that, you've got to be prepared for everything. And COVID was that thing. So living in the city, I still went to work. I still done normal stuff as such, but I didn't go out and socialise because we weren't allowed. So throughout COVID, and also at that time I was changing my medication for my epilepsy, because at that time I was still having seizures, but I was managing on my own, and I didn't want my parents and all that. So I was living on my own, going to the...
Were the seizures okay at this point in time? And the
So
manageable? What were you...
they were monthly, but I knew when they were coming, and like I had a sensation beforehand. Like I was very aware of them.
So you felt you could manage them?
Yeah. Well, I felt I could manage them, but I spoke to my neurologist, it was, well, it's COVID, blah de blah. We can't do anything at the moment. And then I think it was a year, 2021 maybe, no, 2020, sorry. And the doctor had said to us, right, just slowly come off that tablet, slowly go on this tablet, and it'll work, don't worry. So I'm there, bear in mind, this tablet I was on was like a safety blanket. I always felt safe with it because I thought, well, it's doing something. I'm not in the worst position I was when I was 14 or whatever, like I'm living a life, whatever. But it was hard coming off that, because I always thought, well, that's been doing its job for so long. I know it's okay. It's not the best because it's not fully working, but I'm not as bad as I was. So I always had that safety blanket of that tablet, whereas the doctor was like, no, come off that. But doing it over the phone is not the same as face-to-face. So I was coming off these tablets and going on these other tablets thinking they'll do the same, but actually it was hard because, again, it's over the phone. You can't exactly sit down with a person. And my seizures were fine, as in they were once a month, but I knew they were coming. I knew they were very different to what they were like after that. So going to work, whatever, I'd done COVID over 2 years, and then world started to come back to normal, and we could go out and we didn't have to wear masks, anything like that. It was great. So for that year, the year that COVID finally lifted, I had my life back. I could go out, I could do whatever I liked. And then the summer came, and that summer, because a year prior to COVID, I went and worked at Mark Warner, and I was doing that year, this like 2021, and I'd finished work. I'd went out with friends because she lived in Scotland. She was about to go on a cruise ship to work. So I went out, had a few drinks with her, had some food, said goodbye at the train station, off I went home. Bear in mind, I'm relying on public transport. Got the bus home, got into my flat, opened the door, locked the door because I can vaguely remember it, got in the house, I was in the front room, and I had a seizure, which was normal, but it obviously wasn't normal. But for some reason, even if I had a seizure, then I wouldn't let my parents know. For some reason I did. I rang them and I said, I've had a seizure, blah de blah. And Mum said, right, I'll come round and get you. I was like, no, don't come round and get us, blah de blah. I'm fine. No, they came round. But my mum knew, she said she knew something wasn't right. So they came round and my mum said, you just didn't look right. So I went to theirs and I got this massive migraine. I was upstairs in my sister's room and I got this massive migraine. At this point, walking, talking normal, if you get my drift. And then I can remember my mum sitting there, because I'm sure it was an airbed or something on my sister's floor. And my mum was asking my dad, shall I ring me mum? Shall I ring me dad? See what they say, see what they say. in the end they didn't. I think they just ended up taking us to A&E. But at this point, I physically couldn't open my eyes. The migraine, headache, whatever it's called, was that bad. And my brother was home, but because my mum and dad had had a drink that night, luckily my brother was home, and my brother took me down to the hospital. And I can remember getting to the hospital, and I was sitting in a hospital chair thing, and I can't remember it all, but you know, I know we were there for at least like 6 hours waiting for somebody to see us. I can remember getting put in a drip in hospital and being admitted, and my mum obviously left us, went home and come back the next morning. I can't remember anything after. I can remember going through to get admitted, and I went to the toilet, and then after that, I don't know what happened. So I literally was in a comatose type state for 4 or 5 weeks. Being honest, I've got no clue how long it was, but yeah. And I was told, well, my mum was told, oh, she's very complex. We don't really know what's going on. And Mum even says now that she would sit and read packages of sweets that she would bring in, and she would just read that was, even though I wasn't there, but that's how she coped. She used to sit and read packages if she was speaking to us, because she had no idea what to say or what to do, because her daughter was lying in a bed, comatose, not speaking, not talking, nothing. So, and I had all the tests done. I had everything done, I think, under the sun. And then for when I came round I had moved wards twice, I think, by this time. I wasn't aware, and I come round and I used to just have seizure after seizure after seizure. And for months, I say months, I was in hospital 4 months, but it seemed like forever. Doctors and professionals, whatever you want to call them, nurses, they were, you can't go home, you've got to have this, You could, basically they said I had to go home. No, basically they said I had to go somewhere where I had 24/7 care, because at the moment you're not safe to go home. And at this point, I didn't just shut down, but I thought, why, like, you play the pity card, oh, why me? You know, you have a cry. But 4 months into being in hospital, I finally got discharged and sent to Jane Percy House, which was a shithole, which was a care home. I was there for 3 months, and the first day I was there, I got sent back into hospital, and they really had no idea what to do. And I was always told, oh, Abbie, it's just too complex, like this, that and to that. I got then referred to all these different units, even though I had been told I had been referred to them in hospital, like Watergate Park. I hadn't. And then eventually from Jane Percy House, I moved to Bede House, which was, at the time, it was a brand new building, absolutely amazing. You looked at it from the outside, you thought, oh, that's lovely. So I moved there, not to know that actually it's one of the worst rated care home companies in the northeast. So I was there for 2 years. Still, my seizures were out of control, but slowly they started getting a bit better.
Could you walk now, Abbie?
Sorry, no, yeah. So I got discharged from hospital. I'm just thinking you know us. You just don't know us. I got discharged. So I walked in, well, I could say I walked into hospital and I came out paralysed. So after the 4 weeks of whatever happened in the 4 weeks, I woke up totally paralysed. I couldn't even use my arms properly. So I had all that to contend with, and thinking, oh, like, why me? Like, feeling sorry for yourself, because actually, what the fuck just happened? You were ready to go away to work in Greece. The next minute you physically, you can't do anything for yourself. You can't even wipe your ass as such.
So what was that feeling like when you found out?
being honest, I can't even, my mind doesn't even let us go back to that. Like, and at the time, I was very much a bitch, because when I was in hospital, I didn't really, the thought process of what's happened didn't happen. And I think once I left hospital, because there was that much, when I was aware in hospital, there was that much going on from input of doctors and just a busy ward in general, I didn't really have time to think. I don't think, but I might have just blocked it out and been blasé to it all, because I think that's the way I coped. But then to be in Jane Percy House, which was, I was there for 3 months, and to say that not being listened to by the staff, not being listened to by professionals, having arguments with social workers, and literally being left in a room for days, not being able, well, I say not being able to go out, but I wouldn't go out because the people who were in that home weren't cognitively able like me and you. There were more specialised disabilities, what's it called? Special needs, sorry.
So you just felt it was the wrong place for you?
Yeah, so it was totally the wrong place for us. A lot of, I know when I say I want something, it's because there's a reason, not because I'm being there's a reason behind it. Like, and I think a lot of people in, like, the staff in care homes, they're not used to that. They're not used to somebody who knows what they want and knows why they want it, especially me being in the care industry, to then being the person that's being cared for.
So I mean, what was that like? I mean, it must have been, was it scary? Was it frightening? Kind of, your life's completely changed. It's upheaval, and now you're in a care home that is not suited for you, and you feel out of place in this place?
Yeah, so in hospital, I didn't feel that as much. I think I just was blasé to it. Whereas at Jane Percy House, I was literally a prisoner in a room, because I wouldn't go out with the room, as in, they wouldn't get us up to go out with the room because I didn't want to socialise with them people. But the staff didn't want to go, oh, do you want to come out today? It was, and then, do you want something to eat? It got to a point where they didn't even offer us food. So I was literally a prisoner in a room in a care home. To then, for 3 months of that, and to have arguments over arguments, myself also, my mum and dad, about to social workers saying it's not the right placement, to them then saying, well, we'll have nowhere to put her, all this stuff. Bear in mind, at this point, I've still got my flat in Wallsend, which I cannot get back to because of access rights. I can't fit in the doorway kind of style. The doors are too narrow. So I just basically got told, just get on with it, stop whinging. There's kind of people in worse situations. But when you're in that much of a dark, deep hole, you can't see a way out. And for me, moving from Jane Percy House, which literally every single day I spent in the room, in bed pretty much, watching shite on TV just to pass the days, I then moved to Bede House, which was a brand new building, and it was open residential care downstairs, and upstairs it was YPD, which is Young Persons Unit. I thought, ideal. Not ideal, but you know, a new building, it looks like a hotel. There's obviously going to be new staff. There's nobody in at the moment, so there's nobody got a certain table or a certain room or whatever, or chair. I'll go there just for something, because I had nowhere else to go really. So went there, and the first 10 days you had to stay isolated because of COVID. But the first thing I got when I went into there was, the staff were nice, the staff came and checked on you, they give you food. That's everyday essentials, but it felt nice that you got that, whereas in the other home I didn't. It was an old people smell home as well, whereas this was all new. That room was only my room, nobody else had lived in that room before, whereas the room before, somebody had died in it the week before or something. So for me, that room had only been my room, nobody else's room, Bede House. So
you've seen quite a few kind of care homes in the system, haven't you? You've bounced around quite a bit.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems to be it's it's almost like you've done your own research in care homes,
Oh yeah,
but not out of your own choice.
no, not out, no, not at my own choice at
Yeah,
all.
I mean, it's just tough for a young person as well, in a care home, 3 care homes. And I mean, what's that like in your own self? Because you seem to be quite a positive person. And I
Yeah.
think obviously, clearly from what I'm hearing, your lifestyle, your upbringing and your kind of, your proactiveness has helped you kind of, is your mindset, is it that
Yeah, I
you
think
kind of use?
because again, I had the lifestyle of, you know, you go to work, you do your job, you come home, you know, you've got your animals to look after, whatever. But also I had the lifestyle of, oh, if I've saved money, I can go travel, I can do this, I can do this myself, I can go to Australia for 3 months if I want to, because I've saved the money up. But then for it all to be turned on its head and, well, actually, no, you're relying on somebody literally to wipe your ass. Like literally overnight, like everything changed, considering I was a carer and literally the roles kind of reversed. So I was the person and I wasn't the carer no more and somebody else was doing the care job for me. It was
What's that like?
scary, but I don't want to say scary. It was mind-boggling, because even from when I came out of hospital and eventually then from Jane Percy went to Bede House, at that time they used a hoist with us. I didn't transfer by myself. So it was even things like that. I know how to use a hoist because I've done the care work before. There was people coming in trying to get me up and they had no clue. They couldn't even speak English. They didn't know what to do. So that made, I don't know, that made me, like, I think the wave, the shitness that I felt, the sorry for myself came out in, I was going to be a bitch, because you can't do the job that you're meant to do. I have the capacity and I know that you can't do it. I always think, well, what about the other people? What about the people that don't have capacity? So I turned my negative energy, negative thoughts for myself into rage, pretty much, because I didn't like the way I was getting treated. I don't like the way the care system works in general, full stop, even now. But at Bede House, there was a lot of agencies coming in. Not many people gave a shit. I've got a few people to even now that I actually stay in touch with, and they cared, whereas it was a job for everybody else.
So at what point did it change? Did that positive outlook kind of move on, because you've done a lot since then? Just to kind of move away from that to more the positive, who you really are?
So in May 2 years ago, May a year ago, 2022, May 2022, I finally bought my bungalow, which was a long time in the making. I believe that my mum had pretty much put my name down in it for it in the December, and eventually got it in the May, but it was a long slog. But I finally got it, dotted line, signed it, and then I started looking for things to put in it, whatever. At this point I was still at Bede House, but you know, I went shopping and bought everything you need for a house pretty much, because I always, again, started from scratch. Sold all the things in my old flat because it wasn't the kind of thing I was going for now. So, and in my head, that year, I turned in my head, I was like, I'm going to be that bitch that gets a new build house and has every mod con going, because I've had a shit few months, shit few years. Why can't I get my dream house as such? So in my head already there, that was my goal. I was going to get a new build bungalow because I wanted that, and I knew I could achieve it. So that's when my mindset changed to actually, I can do whatever I put my mind to. Like, and when I look back, I think actually, yeah, you can. If you really want something that much, whether it's saving up for a holiday, whether it's your mindset of that actually, you're gonna be able to complete this run, or you're gonna be able to do whatever you put your mind to. You've got to have that positive mindset, and that's, I think, when not my life changed, but the positive outweighed the negatives. And so May, I got my bungalow, and in the July, I moved out of Bede House into my bungalow with a care package, which at the time was, I thought it was great, but basically just a care company came in, and I think there was 4 staff. But it didn't work out, but that doesn't matter. We'll move on from it. We only think positive from there. But moved into there, and then everything just went from better. Everything just seemed to get better. Silly things. I don't know, like, I know I did play wheelchair rugby before, but when I lived at Bede House, it was in Ripe, so my dad would have to drive from home to pick me up, to take us to rugby, to then stay overnight at my mum and dad's on the sofa, to then take us back on the Wednesday. That was a lot for my dad to do.
And why did you seek out wheelchair rugby? Was it just something to do?
It was, I needed something to do. I was very much, at the time when I actually got asked about wheelchair rugby, I didn't want to do a sport, but I was in the Metro Centre with my grandparents, and somebody came up to us and went, do you want to play wheelchair rugby? I train the bulls, and you look like you'd be a good rugby player. And at this point, bear in mind, this guy is just walking. He's a normal guy, even though I hate that word. And I looked at him and I thought, a bit of a weirdo asking some young lass in a wheelchair, do you want to play wheelchair rugby? But I gave him my face. He gave us my Facebook. You know, we swapped contacts. And then a week later, the Barbarians were on TV, and I think it was Look North. And it just gave us that little bit more motivation to go, actually, no, just do it. Step out your comfort zone. I did, but when I first went, I was very apprehensive and nervous. I'm thinking, oh my God. But there was a girl that done it, Grace, and, you know, at least there wasn't just me. There was another girl, and when you start a sport, when you're in a wheelchair, you kind of I don't know if it's just the wheelchair side of it, but I just seem to slot in, and you're part of the team within the first session. And I look back now and I think you are, because now members that are coming in, they're just slotting. It's like they've always been there. So we done that, I done that, and that was a long slog for my dad. And again, not many parents would do that. I do realise that now. And at the time I was like, oh, stop whinging, blah, blah, blah. But actually, it just brings us back to how we're being brought up. My parents will literally do anything for us. And that's shown when I was younger, getting a horse. Oh, Mummy, Daddy, I want a horse for Christmas. That kind of saying, I ask and I got kind of thing, to a point. And then being in the wheelchair, literally my parents would do anything. It's a hell of a lot of miles to cover just for 2 hours of playing rugby, just so I could get out. But at the time I didn't think that, but now I look back and I think, yeah, that is a lot. For even now, play rugby, I've played it for 2 years. I've been to tournaments down in Stoke Mandeville. Not many parents will just go, oh yeah, no bother, we'll take you. Everything, I've never missed. If anything I've wanted to go to, I've been able to go to it, because my dad would be, yeah, no bother, I'll take you. But a lot of parents, that's not the case.
So how important are they to you?
I wouldn't be in the position I am without them, because whether it's socially, whatever, I've obviously as a child growing up, you get brought up as in, you go to school, you come back, you sit at the dining table, you have dinner together, you socialise, you speak about your day, you do your little jobs, whatever, you go and ride the horse, whatever, but you're doing it together. You know, the weekend, we would spend the day together. It wouldn't be the case of, oh, I'm going to go out with the town, because that wasn't possible. Emily never, my sister Emily, she never went out in Newcastle. I don't even think Emily's been out in Newcastle to this day, being honest, and she's 25 now. I don't actually think she has. But like, we didn't, of a weekend, a lot of kids decide to go out with their friends shopping. That wasn't the case for us. We, went out with our friends, but we probably just went ride up to the highest point and back or whatever. But was very much, even I speak to, like, if I spoke to my cousins, there's not many families that actually sit around a dinner table and have dinner together. Even if they've got a bed and breakfast going on or whatever, we've always been a family that, we've always socialised and always been able to have that time where you sit down and you can chat to each other.
And what have you achieved, and how's your life changed being in a chair? And also, do you feel it's changed for the better?
Yeah, so when I look back at like the very beginning of my journey, as such as when I first became paralysed, when I got out into the real world, instead of just being institutionalised in hospitals and care homes, I would say I didn't realise then how much my parents have influenced us throughout my life, but also at that point in time, from them dropping everything to taking us out for the day. Still to this day, I still don't drive. So for us to rely on them to drive me places, not many people can say actually at the flick of a switch, yeah, I can come at 6 o'clock. Dad, will you just take us such and such at 6 o'clock? And I don't live with them, but they live close enough to us that they can support me like that. But not many, and I've learned that through friends as well, not many people have that support of the family. And sometimes I think I'm very quick to get pissed off at my parents, but it's one of those things that it's because they're the closest people you love, and I'm with them. I wouldn't want to say 24/7, but I'm with them a hell of a lot more than I want to be.
Do you think you're better now as a human, as a person?
Yeah. Also, my relationship with my parents are a lot better than they were. Take us back 5-6 years ago, me and my dad would clash heads all the time. From even walking and going to feed the animals or putting the TV on or whatever, we would clash heads with something. Sitting around the table, there would always be something. It would be once a week at least.
So do you feel you're motivated more now?
But
and
now,
I just want to hear what you've achieved as well.
But now I would like to think that if you told me 5 years ago that you've done a Great North Run, you didn't run it, but you pushed it in a wheelchair, you've been to Australia, you play wheelchair rugby, you play sport, like that's not a thing that I would do. Rugby is a man's sport. Like even when we lived at Vallum, it was all the lads used to play for Tynedale, and it was like never really a girly sport. But I play wheelchair rugby. I've been surfing. I've been on holiday. Yeah, I have become a better person. A better person because I've seen things from a different perspective as I would 3 years ago. I think a lot of people are blasé to life. They get up, they go to work, they come home, they have tea, they go to bed, or they have a family in the mix of that. But you don't realise what you've lost until you've lost it. And I've realised that, but the only thing I've really lost is the use of my legs. I've gained a lot more than I've lost. And has it made me a better person today? Probably yes, because of what I've gone through. From the, if you like, medical trauma and being in them homes to now being like, I'm out of there. And I used to joke on going, oh, I'm going to be on, you'll see me on TV next year. I think I've been on TV 3 or 4 times now. Like, I got blasé to it again. I got an Ant-and-Deck Saturday night takeaway holiday. I joked on, I was blasé about it, and then it came true. And I do believe things happen for a reason. I didn't just get that Ant-and-Deck holiday just because. There was a reason behind it. I wasn't just on Look North because it was, there's a reason behind it. And I think, and again, with the rugby, there's a reason behind why I've joined a team like that. But I don't know, it's just life likes to throw curveballs. And again, if I wasn't as I am now, I wouldn't have met the people that I've got around us now. Yes, I've still got some really good friends that I've stayed in touch with throughout, like when I was younger and etc. But the people who I've met from the last 3 years, Drew, the gym, people at rugby, I wouldn't know them. So I think, yeah, life has changed, but I think I've become a better person for it, if that's, because what if I didn't become paralysed? What if I didn't become in a wheelchair? What if I didn't become disabled? What would my life have been then? And then I look at now what I've done. What I always, well, I'm just thinking, what's the next challenge I'm going to do? Whereas before, 3 years ago, my life was a very basic life. I went to work, came home, you know, yes, okay, I've got animals, you know, my parents, but now my life's so much more interesting, even though I would never think that would be the case becoming disabled.
And just on a last message to somebody out there, like what would you say to somebody out there who's been recently in a chair, or recently found themselves in a wheelchair?
Life gets better. Your worst day is your worst day. It's only going to get better from there, and you've got to make, you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. You've got to think of the positives, not the negatives.